What about second breakfast?
Time for second breakfast.
What's up, everybody? Monster from Breakdowns for Breakfast here. Got a new episode of Second Breakfast for you. So today what I wanted to do was do a little bit of a companion piece on our episode on the Pulp Fiction soundtrack. Now, that came in as a request from the guys over at the Ready Set Radio podcast. For some reason, they really like giving us soundtracks, but hey, it's fun. It's all good. So during our episode, me and Danger talked mostly about the music. Obviously, we touched on certain things about the film, but that wasn't what we were there to do. We were there to talk about the soundtrack. So Danger did an amazing job of giving a lot of facts and cool trivia about why, Quentin Tarantino picked some of the songs that he did and all that. And that was great. So what I wanted to do here was I was trying to think what would be entertaining or interesting to kind of go along with that. And a couple ideas that crossed my mind, and most of them I thought, no, that's going to be boring and people aren't going to want to listen to that. Because I thought about maybe watching the film and then doing like a film breakdown. But come on, it's Pulp Fiction. Everybody's seen it. Everybody has an opinion on it. And so I thought, let's try to do something a little bit different. So what I decided to do was I went through and looked at some YouTube videos, looked at IMDb, looked at a couple of other podcasts, and thought, okay, how about I just give you guys a list of behind the scenes facts, some interesting little things that maybe you didn't know, maybe you did know, but just some general trivia that next time you're like hanging out with your buddies talking about movies and stuff, and Pulp Fiction will inevitably come up, you'll have some ammunition to throw out into the conversation. Or maybe this is all shit you already knew and you don't care. But you know what? It didn't cost you anything to be here and listen to this, so let's go through a few of these things. So, Uma Thurman originally turned down the role of Mia Wallace. Quentin Tarantino was so desperate to have her, though, as Mia, he ended up reading her the script over the phone, which finally convinced her to take on the role. Now, Mr. Blonde, a.k.a. Vic Vega, played by Michael Madsen in Reservoir Dogs, which was Tarantino's first film in 1992, is the brother of Vincent Vega, which is John Travolta's character in Pulp Fiction. Tarantino even had a spin-off film in development titled Double V Vega, which was a prequel to both movies. Eventually, this was scrapped because both actors ended up being too old to play younger versions of themselves. It's one of those things that makes you wonder, like in today's culture with the way they de-age actors and actresses for films, maybe revisit that. I don't know. This is kind of fun. The F word is used 265 times. Go figure. When we talked about the film, me and Danger, I think, both kind of acknowledged that the Bruce Willis sections, or at least for me, the Bruce Willis sections were kind of weak. Well, what's kind of interesting is Bruce Willis was only worked on the film for 18 days. Now, but speaking of Bruce Willis's part, this was really interesting. The cab driver that Bruce Willis gets into her cab after the fight, her name is Esmeralda Villalobos, and she's played by an actress named Angela Jones. She appeared in a 30-minute short called Curdled from 1991, in which she played a character who cleaned up after murders. This makes her fascinated by the idea of murder. So Quentin Tarantino saw that film and decided to use that character, not just the actress, but the character she was playing as the cab driver in Pulp Fiction. So some of the scenes of Jimmy Dimmick, I don't know if they ever say his last name in the movie. They just call him Jimmy, but it's the guy that Quentin Tarantino plays. Those scenes were actually directed and uncredited by Robert Rodriguez, which, if you know anything about Tarantino and Rodriguez, they're buddies. They always help each other out and stuff. So Samuel L. Jackson previously auditioned for Reservoir Dogs, but if you've seen Reservoir Dogs, you know he's not in it. What's interesting, though, is from this point forward, Pulp Fiction moving forward, with only two exceptions being Death Proof and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Samuel L. Jackson has been involved in all of Quentin Tarantino's films in some capacity. Sometimes he's a character, he's an actor in the film. Other times he's just a voice. Like, for example, and I think I said this on the show, my favorite Quentin Tarantino film is Inglourious Bastards. And Samuel L. Jackson has one voiceover in that entire film. But as soon as he starts talking, you know it's him. So Tarantino offered John Travolta his choice of being in From Dusk Till Dawn or Pulp Fiction. Luckily for John Travolta's career, he picked Pulp Fiction. I love From Dusk Till Dawn, but it's one of those movies you kind of have to be in the mood for, and it's a wild ride. Pulp Fiction's considered one of the greatest films of all time. From Dusk Till Dawn is considered a wild horror movie. So, good on you, John. I thought this was interesting. Chronologically, the last scene in the movie is Butch and Fabi, whatever her name is, riding away on the motorcycle. Because the first sound you hear in the movie is the same motorcycle's engine. When it starts with the two of them sitting at the diner, before they even start talking, you hear a motorcycle go by. And Tarantino said that was the motorcycle from Butch. Now, towards the end of the film, Jules says he wants to retire and become a drifter. Now, I don't know if you remember this, but in Kill Bill Volume 2, Samuel L. Jackson turned up as a guy named Rufus, a piano-playing drifter. So, some more of that weird in-universe Tarantino stuff, you know. So this is also really cool. This is one of those things that I wouldn't have noticed, and I saw it on a YouTube video. But during the scene where Mia Wallace is having, she's ODing, and they give her the shot of adrenaline to save her life, there's two board games that are in the shot that you can see. It's The Game of Life and Operation, which, come on, that's pretty good. One last thing, and this could be a whole episode on its own, and I'm here by myself. I'm not trying to have a debate with myself, but just something to think about. There have been many speculations on what was inside Wallace's briefcase, and I've heard all kinds of different things. And one of the big ones is that it is Wallace's soul, because when you see him for the first time, it's the back of his head, and Ving Rhames, the guy who plays him, has the Band-Aid on the back of his neck. Well, truth be told, Ving Rhames was shaving his head, and he nicked himself, and he put a Band-Aid on it. And when he came to set, Quentin said, "That looks really cool. Let's just, it just adds to the mystique of this character." So that whole thing about Wallace's soul and all that has sort of, was never Tarantino's, goal or in his mind when he was, doing those shots. But I think that sort of the fact that the lock, the code on the lock on the briefcase is 666, I think kind of gives it sort of that. And then also, Samuel L. Jackson does the Bible verse right before. And so there's sort of this supernatural aspect that they don't go into a lot of detail on. And there's some other wild theories. There's one, the confused breakfast. I don't know where it came from, but I heard it on there, where it was inside the briefcase was rock and roll itself, and the whole story is an allegory about music and stuff. It's super far-fetched, and I'm guarantee it's not true, but it just lends itself to what a good film Pulp Fiction is, because all these years later, we're still debating it, we're still discussing it. So the last thing I was going to leave you with, hate to be a downer, but inside of the briefcase was just a light bulb with a battery so it would shine. So there you have it. So most of those are kind of well-known facts, I think. And I didn't want to bore us with the same old, same old. There's a million movie podcasts out there We're not one of them. And so if you want a deep dive into the film, like I said, The Confused Breakfast is a cool podcast, and I listened to their episode on it to get some ideas and, before we recorded the soundtracked episode. So if you want to know more, The Confused Breakfast is a cool podcast to listen to. But like I said, there's so much content out there about Pulp Fiction that, knock yourself out. I just wanted to give you a couple cool little things that I discovered that I thought were interesting. So anyway, I hope you all have a great day. Thanks for sticking around and hanging out with us here at Breakdowns for Breakfast, Second Breakfast. And I hope you have a great day.